It's the morning of August 12, 2000. The Russian Navy, under Fleet Commander Admiral Vyacheslav Popov, was conducting its first large-scale naval exercise since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, codenamed Summer X. The maneuvers were to be carried out in the Barents Sea, between 30 warships and 3 attack subs, including the pride of the Russian Navy, the K-141 Kursk nuclear submarine. The exercise was intended to be a display of Russian military strength by newly elected President Vladimir Putin. But when Kursk went missing a few hours into the operation, Summer X quickly became the backdrop for one of the most haunting maritime disasters and infamous cover-ups in the annals of naval history. So what events led to the vanishing of the mighty Kursk? And why did the Russian government go to such extraordinary lengths to cover it up? The tragic tale of Kursk began in the early 1990s in a post-Soviet era marked by geopolitical uncertainty and distrust. Tasked with designing a war vessel that could solidify the nation's maritime supremacy, Russian naval engineers created Project 949A Anti, the NATO-designated Oscar II class of submarines that included the K-141 Kursk. Designed by the Soviet Union's Central Design Bureau near the end of the Cold War, Kursk was built to hunt and destroy entire NATO aircraft carrier battle groups. At 505 feet long and 60 feet wide, the vessel displaced a staggering 24,000 tons when submerged, twice the displacement of U.S. Los Angeles-class subs. The size of 2 Boeing 747s, Kursk was one of the largest cruise missile submarines ever built and was considered unsinkable by the Russian Navy. Kursk's outer hull was made of 1/3-inch thick nickel-steel alloy plates lined with 3 inches of rubber. This design decreased its magnetic signature, helping Kursk hide from U.S. magnetic anomaly detectors. The sturdier inner pressure hull was made of 2-inch thick steel plates, which the engineers claimed could withstand a direct hit from a torpedo. Kursk's interior was divided into 10 watertight compartments, with a torpedo room at the front of the sub in Compartment 1. Midship, in twin compartments of Section 5, 2 nuclear-powered steam turbines churned out 49,000 horsepower each, propelling Kursk at an impressive 37 miles per hour when submerged. Able to remain underwater for 120 days, Kursk could circumnavigate the globe 3 times without ever surfacing. The sub's true strength, though, was her firepower. Fully loaded, Kursk was armed with 24 Type 65 torpedoes, each capable of sinking an aircraft carrier, and 24 P-700 Granite cruise missiles that have an operational range of over 388 miles. Named in honor of the famous Battle of Kursk 50 years earlier, the K-141 was assigned to the Northern Fleet's 7th SSGN Division, 1st Submarine Flotilla. Kursk sailed from the former Soviet shipyard in Severodvinsk to her home port of Vidyayevo, Murmansk Oblast, in 1994. Fast forward to the early hours of August 10, 2000. Along with some of Russia's most formidable naval vessels, including the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier and the Pyotr Veliki battlecruiser, Kursk leaves port for the open waters of the Barents Sea. Her crew of 118 have recently received a citation for being the best submarine crew in the Northern Fleet, despite most having only been part of one deployment in the last 5 years. For the first 2 days of Summer X, Kursk performs flawlessly under the command of Captain First Rank Gennady Lyachin. After successfully launching a Granite cruise missile while submerged on August 10th, the sub avoided detection by the fleet for the next 2 days. Just before 9 a.m. on the fateful morning of August 12th, Captain Lyachin requests permission to conduct a torpedo launch. Command gives the go-ahead, tasking Kursk's crew with attacking the Pyotr Veliki battlecruiser using 2 dummy torpedoes. The vessel is brought to periscope depth and soon locates its target. At 11:29 a.m., HQ receives word that Kursk has loaded the first of 2 Type 65 kit torpedoes, nicknamed Fat Girl, into the number 4 tube on the starboard side. It's the last anyone will hear from Lyachin and his crew. HQ waits for confirmation of a hit, but the torpedo is never fired.
Say your prayers.
I'm not a religious unit.
At 11:29 and 34 seconds, the hydroacoustics of both the Karelia submarine and the Pyotr Veliki detect signals indicative of an underwater explosion. 2 minutes and 14 seconds later, a second event registers on seismographs across northern Europe and as far away as Alaska. The explosion measures 4.2 on the Richter scale and is equivalent to detonating 5 tons of TNT. The blast is so powerful, it causes the hull of the Pyotr Veliki to shudder, yet somehow fails to concern Fleet Commander Popov, who was aboard the battlecruiser at the time. While the pretend skirmishes of Summer X continue on the surface for the next 2 hours, the men of Kursk are at the bottom of the sea, fighting for their lives. Yet no one seemed to care. It wasn't until the exercise concluded at 1:30 in the afternoon that Commander Popov finally ordered a helicopter from the Pyotr Veliki to search for any sign of Kursk and her crew. Three hours earlier, when Kursk received her orders to attack the Pyotr Veliki, the torpedo room crew began loading a Type 65 76A kit torpedo into tube number 4. Fueled by a combination of hydrogen peroxide and kerosene, the Type 65 was armed with a 1,000-pound warhead capable of sinking an aircraft carrier from 100 kilometers away. The torpedo the crew loaded that day was a dummy without a live warhead, but a faulty weld on the weapon created a greater threat than any amount of ordnance could have, and it was a threat to Kursk, not her prey. By its nature, hydrogen peroxide is a highly reactive compound, making it an ideal oxidizer for fuels like kerosene. On the other hand, its volatility also makes it highly unstable and dangerous if it comes into contact with catalysts such as copper and bronze. In the case of Kursk, this instability proved catastrophic. The faulty weld on the Type 65 allowed hydrogen peroxide to leak out and contact the metal components of the torpedo. The reaction caused a fire that ignited over 3 tons of concentrated hydrogen peroxide and kerosene. This initial explosion burned at nearly 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit and instantly killed the 7-man torpedo room crew. The bulkhead between the second and third compartments is strong enough to withstand the blast, but a pressurized valve in the ventilation system is left open. This opening allows the fire to spread through the third and fourth compartments, killing everyone in the sleeping quarters and control room. A little more than 2 minutes later, the fire detonates 7 990-pound live warheads in rapid succession, registering on seismographs nearly 5,000 miles away. The hull of the Kursk is designed to withstand an external torpedo blast, but not one from within. The massive explosion rips a 20-foot hole in Kursk's hull and collapses the first 3 compartments, killing approximately 80 crew and observers from Fleet Command. Incredibly, the bulkheads of the 5th compartment withstand the blast, enabling both reactors to shut down as they are designed to do. But this only buys a brief reprieve for the 23 survivors, who are now in a race against the clock for survival. In the event of an emergency, The crew would normally move to the third compartment and evacuate the sub in an escape capsule. But because the second explosion crushed the first 4 compartments, the escape shuttle was either disabled or rendered inaccessible to the survivors. With the control and radio rooms also destroyed, there is no way to communicate with Fleet Command. Instead of escaping to the surface, the survivors retreat to the 9th compartment in the tail end of Kursk, trapped in a suffocating embrace of darkness. On the surface, it is a moment frozen in time. The helicopter sent to find Kursk returns without locating the sub or her rescue buoy, which should have been released automatically when the first fire started. When Kursk fails to surface as scheduled 45 minutes after the exercise, Popov begins to worry something has gone wrong. He places the search and rescue team on standby and orders reconnaissance planes to take up the hunt for Kursk. Minutes drag into hours, and it's nearly midnight before North Fleet Command declares an emergency. Summer X is put on hold, and the entire fleet is tasked with locating the missing K-141 Kursk. Operating at night, the ship's crews are relying on the signal that should be coming from Kursk's rescue buoy to locate the vessel. What no one knew at the time, though, is that the buoy had been deliberately disabled in 1999 when Kursk was in the Mediterranean shadowing the American fleet during the Kosovo War. Concerned the buoy might accidentally deploy and give away her position to the Americans, Kursk's officers made the fateful decision to disable the safety device. It was never reconnected before Summer X began a year later, meaning Kursk's best hope for being found wasn't even in play. While the Northern Fleet searched the Barents Sea for a rescue buoy that wasn't there, 23 Russian sailors remained trapped in total darkness on the floor of the ocean. With no heat and no power to light Compartment 9, the sub must have felt more like a steel tomb than the Navy's most formidable war machine. The Northern Fleet searched through the long, cold night into the early hours of August 13th. At 4:40 a.m., the echo sounder aboard the Pyotr Veliki detected 2 anomalies on the seabed. A former lumber carrier, the Mikhail Rudnitsky, was dispatched to deliver 2 man-deep submergence rescue vehicles called DSRVs to the coordinates of the anomalies. Mikhail Rudnitsky arrived at 10 a.m. and launched the DSRVs. At 2:30 p.m., one of the submersibles collided with an unidentified object on the seafloor and immediately surfaced. As the DSRV rose, its crew caught a glimpse of the Kursk's propellers and stern stabilizer. The sub had been found, but a subsequent video inspection revealed that Kursk was critically damaged with no chance of surfacing on its own. It was also listing at a 25-degree angle on the seafloor in 350 feet of water, making rescue efforts a long shot. Fleet Command knew that if there were survivors aboard the sub, time was running out for them. The fact that Popov understood the urgency of the situation makes the Russian government's public handling of the Kursk disaster all the more baffling. Instead of being honest with the missing sailors' families, Admiral Popov tells reporters on the 13th that Summer X was a resounding success. But at the Vidyayevo naval base in Murmansk, rumors of a missing sub began circulating among the families of the missing sailors. On August 14th, the families took their concerns to Northern Fleet headquarters. Again, Popov lies, telling the families that Kursk descended to the seafloor on August 13th to deal with some minor technical issues. He claimed communications had been established and that oxygen and electricity were being fed to the sailors via the SDRVs. Nothing could be farther from the truth. For nearly a week, rough seas and damage to the escape hatch in Compartment 9 prevented Russian rescue crews from attaching the DSRVs to Kursk's hull. A half-dozen other countries offered assistance with the rescue, but Moscow stubbornly refused. Protecting its national security interests, the United States Navy closely monitored Summer X from two Los Angeles-class submarines, the USS Toledo and Memphis. When Kursk exploded on August 12th, the American Secretary of Defense and the National Security Advisor were both informed about her sinking even before the Kremlin. The U.S. alerted its allies, and within hours of the Kursk going down, the Brits, Germans, French, Italians, and Israelis all volunteered their assistance. The Americans even offered use of a deep-sea rescue vehicle, but Putin wasn't about to allow any foreign government access to its most advanced sub-technology. It was a cold, calculated decision that likely cost another 23 Russian sailors their lives. With pressure mounting from both the media and the families of Kursk's crew, Moscow finally accepted help from Norway on August 17th, 5 days after the sinking. 2 days later, the Norwegian rescue ships Normand Pioneer and Seaway Eagle arrived, carrying a British rescue sub designated LR-5. British and Norwegian dive teams worked around the clock to gain access to Kursk, but only Russian divers would be permitted inside the sub. Employing a special tool that shoots a high-velocity mixture of water and cutting grit, the divers cut through Kursk's hull and entered Compartment 8, from which they were able to gain access to the 9th. What they discovered was a nightmare. 23 bodies floated lifeless in the dark 9th compartment, a handful of which appeared to be badly burned. A letter found in the pocket of Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov describes the last hours of their lives. It reads, "I am writing blindly. The time is 13:15. All personnel from Sections 6, 7, and 8 have moved to Section 9. There are 23 people here. We made this decision because none of us can escape. It's too dark to write here, but I'll try. It looks like we have no chance, maybe 10 to 20%. I hope that someday someone will read this. Don't despair." There have been reports that Kolesnikov wrote what happened to Kursk on the back of his letter, but the Russian government has never acknowledged this. As for the burnt bodies in Compartment 9, it was later determined that the survivors accidentally ignited an oxygen regeneration canister, burning up the last of their air, as well as 3 of the sailors. It's believed the others survived the fast-burning blaze by diving below the waist-deep water. Unfortunately, they would have resurfaced in a room devoid of oxygen and quickly suffocated. On August 21st, 2000, Russian Northern Fleet Chief of Staff Mikhail Motsak finally told the truth to the media and the families of the dead sailors, stating that Kursk was flooded and that all 118 of her crew had perished. Admiral Popov also addressed the public through television, asking forgiveness from the families for not bringing your boys back. Rather than admitting to such a colossal disaster, Vladimir Putin initially blamed the sinking of Kursk on a collision with a NATO submarine, possibly the USS Memphis or Toledo, that were monitoring the exercises in the Barents Sea that day. Moscow pushed this lie for 2 years, despite the American Navy's insistence that both the Memphis and the Toledo were undamaged and fully operational immediately following the sinking of Kursk. This would not have been possible if either sub had hit the Kursk, which is twice their size. The devastated families of the sailors who died aboard Kursk weren't buying the lie either, so Putin was forced to change tactics. Instead of blaming NATO and the United States, the Russian president attacked the country's media outlets that had been harshly critical of the government's response. During a private meeting with 350 of the victims' families, Putin vilified oligarchs who own Russia's news outlets. He accused them of depleting the military by stealing funds meant for national defense and using them to build their media empires. Putin even threatened to counter the oligarchs' misinformation campaign by creating state-owned news outlets that would offer honest and objective reporting. None of the empty promises or lies offered by Putin and the Russian Navy would bring back the Kursk or her crew of 118. Sadly, some of the victims' families would have to wait a full year for the bodies of their loved ones to be recovered. On October 3, 2000, a Dutch company, Murdermystery, succeeded in raising Kursk and brought her home to Murmansk, along with the remains of 118 victims. According to the official report issued by Prosecutor General Vladimir Ustinov in 2002, Kursk was brought down by a fire caused by a faulty weld on the dummy Type 65 torpedo. A scathing, top-secret report filed a month later cited stunning breaches of discipline, shoddy, obsolete, and poorly maintained equipment, and negligence, incompetence, and mismanagement as underlying causes of the disaster. Yet no one was ever charged with a crime. A symbol of Russian naval might, Kursk was both an engineering marvel and a glaring example of our ever-increasing overconfidence in technology. Its advanced design, along with the Russian Navy's belief that she was unsinkable, undoubtedly and ironically, played a role in Kursk's downfall. The disaster remains a stark reminder of the dangers of technological hubris and the potentially tragic consequences that come with a lack of transparency and accountability in governance. After much difficulty, a memorial was finally completed on July 26, 2009, on Russia's Navy Day. It was placed on the observation deck of the Church of the Savior on Waters in Murmansk. 3 years later, in July of 2012, divers and the Northern Fleet Command placed a 2-meter-tall Orthodox cross on the floor of the Barents Sea at the site of the disaster. Today, the legacy of the Kursk endures, sadly, as a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to venture into the unknown, only to meet an untimely end at the hands of ignorance and pride.